Hello, welcome Johnny to the CosmereCon 2024. Super thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, for the ones of you who don't know, Johnny O'Neill is the co-founder of Brotherwise Games, and now they also working in the TTRPG for the Stormlight Archive. And this is one of the huge things that we are going to talk about today. And something that came out and was like shipping this year were like the miniatures for the Stormlight Archive game as well. So how was the campaign? What do you think about the miniatures? Well, we have them already here at home. Here is our
awesome.
Fin, and we just wanted to show our Shalan.
Yeah.
It's still in the back in the box because we are not sure what we want to do, you know. The collector's in on us is like, no, keep it on the box. But then it's like, but we would like to display it, so we are still deciding.
Yeah, that's always a tough one. My background, like the first thing I did out of graduate school was work in the toy industry, and I worked on like Masters of the Universe, high-end action figures and WWE, a lot of different collectible toys. And yeah, it's do you take it out? I've always been a fan of taking it out, but that's if it has like joints and things. If it's just a little statue like these are, I think I can leave it in the package and that's cool. But either way is good.
Yeah, so we are very happy. I think that almost everybody, because the miniatures campaign that they did, they created like the idea of that campaign was creating the canonical visuals for a lot of characters of the Stormlight Archive, so they can bring that into other projects, which is now also the TTRPG.
Yeah.
And it was very challenging because we started like having, I think it was like the beginning, like 24 miniatures, and then we were like going on the stretch goals, and we ended with something around 40 maybe, and it was huge.
Yeah, no, it ended up being a lot of characters, and that was a project that we started at the point that we went on Kickstarter. We had many of the 3D models underway, but it was still relatively early in the project. Like when we didn't reveal a character, like the Lopen, didn't show up at first in the campaign because we weren't done with him. Rock, we were doing things as we went. That meant that there was still some lag between when that campaign ended and when everything was approved. There were characters. Every character was very heavily and carefully scrutinized by Brandon because this was his chance to make canonical versions of all of these characters. And there were some, Hoyd, our wit miniature, the Lopen. There were a few of those that just we went back a dozen times with different versions before he found the Lopen that was handsome enough, or the wit that had the right balance of mischievous and heroic. And so that process took a while, and that pushed out the production a bit, which pushed out the fulfillment a bit. And I do want to apologize, especially for folks in Spain, but also in Latin America. Those were some of the last regions to get products. There are still a handful of people in the Canary Islands, which is just impossible to ship things to for whatever reason. It's stuck in custom. We don't completely understand why it's so hard to get things there, but that was really challenging fulfillment campaign. We chose a partner that we understood to be very good and reputable, but who we'd never worked with in the past. Our company's been around for 12 years, and we've worked with different distribution partners, and we just got very unlucky with that choice of partner, and with there were some things on our end where it took longer to get things done than I would have liked, longer than it should have. But there were also just on the fulfillment side, a sort of process that should have been 2 months that took 5, and that is something we're going to be doing very differently next time.
Yeah, well, but once we got them home, they are gorgeous. I mean,
good.
You know that if you told me like 12 years ago that I was like discovering Rochard like we all did, and that one day I will have something like this at home, to play or to display, I wouldn't have expected something like this maybe after one adaptation. Like, if there is an adaptation, most likely we will start to get these kind of things. But having something like this before, it's amazing. So thank you for all the efforts. We are super, super happy with this.
It is something I think, it's a dream come true to be able to work on these things. And it is, at the end of the day, you see Brandon and he's a huge success, but in the great scheme of things, Dragonsteel is still a pretty small company. Brotherwise is a very small company. And the fact that we're able to design all of these things, like, the amount of individual characters and complexity and quality that was in this is similar to when I would work on toy lines for movies and in the toy industry, things like How to Train Your Dragon, where we've got more characters in this than I think we had in that toy line. And that was a toy line that did, tens and tens of millions of dollars. And so we're able to bring all of that together, but it's a tricky process and one that involves a lot of love and care. But the good news, I think, is that with the miniatures and the figurines and the statue especially, we were really stretching our capabilities as to what's possible to get done at the scale of production that is available to us. Whereas with the next couple of games projects coming out, those are right in our wheelhouse. That is what we know how to make. The Mistborn game, it's a card game with little accessories and things like that, but it's mostly paper and punch board in terms of the actual components. We know how to make that very well and be able to turn around pretty quickly and all of that. And then, of course, the role-playing game is making books. And we're working very closely with Dragonsteel, who has a lot of experience making books. And books are, obviously, it's possible to have mistakes with page numbers or misprints and things like that. But as a product that we can get done, physically shipped to people and send around the world, it's just much more straightforward. A book isn't going to melt and distort on its way from China to the EU to Spain. So we've got all of those things going. The next couple of years worth of products, I think, are really going to benefit from the learning curve that we just went through on the miniatures and statue and figurines. And everything is lining up to be going really well.
Yeah, well, the statues over there.
Yeah, I see.
So, no, and I think, well, it's interesting because I understand how the miniatures came to life, but I'm still curious about how the TTRPG happened. Because it's like, in the past, there was like another TTRPG from a different IP. It was for Mistborn. But then I'm not sure how did you like put the idea on the table? Or was it something like just came out when you were discussing with them about the different things that you may be able to do?
When we talked to Brandon about making games, the number one thing on my list was a TTRPG, because that's the kind of game that got me into gaming. I grew up reading my older brother's Dragon magazines and all his Dungeons and Dragons manuals and his Palladium books, all these different systems. He didn't actually have time to play a lot of those things. And I certainly, as like a 8-year-old, 9-year-old, wasn't, going and getting in my friends and playing most of those things. But I read them cover to cover nonstop. So that was really my geeky origin story, is growing up with his comic books and his Dungeons and Dragons books and trying to think of like, oh, what game would I make? What fantasy thing would I make if I was grown up? And so we have other very cool things coming. But the other thing about a TRPG is there's so many ways to expand it. And if we're going to do that, we have a multi-year partnership with Brandon. And I wanted to, as early as possible in that partnership, get to the RPG side of things. And so we had already started talking about the miniatures at the point when we went to Brandon and said, hey, we'd like to do more. But it was a very natural transition, of course, from making Call to Adventure, a game about making a character, to making miniatures, to making an RPG.
Would you say then that, for example, the Call to Adventure game could help us like maybe create the background of our character? Because some people, I'm not sure if they are familiar with the Call to Adventure. It's been, I think the original one was translated into Spanish. I've seen that in a couple of stores here.
Yeah,
so...
we've got to make that happen. With Call to Adventure, it is absolutely, you could use Call to Adventure to help build your Stormlight RPG character. We didn't build the Stormlight RPG around that, but we did build the Stormlight RPG around having familiar mechanics, pulling things from like the D20 system that a lot of people know about while adding new things. And there happens to end up being a nice overlap with call to adventure and the attributes that you gain in that. So we will have some optional rules for how to take your call to adventure character and turn it into an RPG character. And yeah, we gotta get a Spanish translation available for folks.
Yes, please, because this is one of the topics. I mean, this is like the elephant in the room, always the elephant in the room. They were asking, are we going to get like the Spanish translation of the game? I told them that we discussed this topic before. It's very complicated to have them like on the very go of the Kickstarter. That you mentioned that it's one of the things that you would like to do, but
Yes.
we are not completely sure about the timing because it's complex as well.
Spanish is my top priority for translation, and it's, I don't have it locked down yet. I don't have it completely figured out yet, but it's hard to imagine a world where that doesn't happen. If the Kickstarter is successful and we can get a partner to help translate it for us, then yes, absolutely. And we have a couple Spanish speakers on the team, but nobody who's a trained translator. So I think the key is just getting it all done and then handing it over for translation. But the good news is we're very on schedule for that. When I look at where we were for the miniatures campaign versus where we were for the RPG, it's just much more favorable. We're going into the RPG with an almost finished product, something that we're going to be able to get off to the printers within a pretty short period of time after the campaign ends. So that's very exciting. That's what we're working toward, which means we can also get it to translators and all of that. But right now, well, I could tell you a little bit about sort of where we are with all of that, but that opens up a couple of other topics.
We mentioned in another time, I'm not sure if it was talking between the two of us or maybe Brandon, but that there's going to be like the players role playing the guide, the player's guide, and then there's going to be like kind of a lore book. And like some time ago, Brandon mentioned that one of the things he wanted to do is like an art book for Roshar. I'm not sure if this is kind of the thing or thing-ish.
Yeah, no, I can tell you that it is. And so it was almost a year ago that Brandon looked us in the eye and said, you know what? People have asked for an art book for years. People have asked for a world guide for years. This feels like the right time to do it. And so we have actually 3 main books that will be offered in our Stormlight RPG campaign. So there's the handbook, which is very focused on game rules. It's for both players and game masters. And it does have some new lore, especially lore about the Knights Radiant, that will reveal exciting new things about the orders we don't know as well. But it's more focused on the gameplay. The world guide is much more focused on lore. So it has some gameplay information. It has like the adversary profiles, like, the Dungeons and Dragons equivalent would be the monster manual, but that's toward the end of the book. And the rest of the book is art and lore. And a lot of that is new lore. And that is something that we're collaborating very closely with Dan Wells and Brandon to make canonical, to make official. And that's sitting with Brandon right now. Like, today he'll be reviewing in detail another chapter from that book. So it's going to be called the Stormlight World Guide and Art Book, and we couldn't be more excited.
How many pages can we know? Like a couple thousand?
It's pretty. I think all the books are like pretty standard RPG, book length. Around a couple hundred pages. I can tell you though that every book is very richly illustrated. That's pretty exciting for us. So the amount of beautiful artwork, there will be some past artwork that's never been showcased or never been showcased at this size before, but it's mostly brand new artwork that you've never seen before.
Whoa. Okay, so what do we need to have like 4 of them? No, and for example, another thing that it's like when you are reading the Stormlight Archive in Terry Pratchett for the This World series, there is like the physics of this world and the science, and it's like, please, I need one of those. I'm reaching that point reading the Stormlight Archive that they're talking about sound and waves, and I'm like, where is the book? Where is the book explaining this? It's bananas.
Yeah.
No, it's insane.
It's funny. Last week I was meeting with Brandon, and he was explaining something. He was like, I asked him a question that was like a deep Raffo type, very hard to understand the answer to kind of question. And he was giving me the answer, but then he kind of stopped himself and he said, this is so detailed. This is like explaining computer programming. Let me give you something written down, and I will get that to you. And he said, and this is too detailed to ever put in one of the novels. So let's make sure that what I get you ends up in one of these books. So, and that actually reminds me that I just told you what 2 of the 3 books are. The third book, which will be the shortest of the 3, but also a nice hardcover book, will be the adventure. And the adventure, there's so much I want to tell you about the adventure that I can't tell you right now. But it is something that is a story that came to us from Brandon and Dan. And when we saw it, we said, what? You're going to let us do this in the adventure? We've been running some people through playtests. I ran a playtest at Dragonsteel headquarters last week with some core team members, and they were like, what? So it is very cool. It is an adventure for levels 1 through 6. Mm-hmm. And you go on a journey across Roshar, takes place during the Words of Radiance time frame. And so it takes you away from the Shattered Plains. You spend a little bit of time there, but it gets you on kind of the other side of the world. And it is just incredibly cool, adds exciting new things to canon. And yeah, it's something that I think when people see it, they're just going to be very surprised by how integrated it is into the story of the world. The campaign will begin in August. So
August. Okay.
Yes,
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, so no, it is. It's coming pretty soon, but there's also a new edition of Dungeons and Dragons coming out. We'd like to get out before that happens. It is shorter between Words of Radiance and this than we might ideally like, but this won't be, even the top level pledges for this won't approach what a top level pledge for that. We want to get it going so that we can make more expansions to it and everything like that. Originally, we were going to kickstart in spring, but because Dragonsteel moved Words of Radiance to spring to kind of give people room to get everything from the original Secret Projects Kickstarter done before this campaign happened, we moved ours back. I think that ends up being just better for everybody because it's just giving us more time. So it means originally we were planning to kickstart around now, and we could have, but this way, when we kickstart in August, it will be that much more prepared, that much more ready. And also, it's been very helpful to make sure that the role-playing game fully encompasses, books 1 through 5, and so that we're not just doing a books 1 through 4 role-playing game or something. Getting the book 5 content in there, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned expansions because we don't have the original book yet, but I'm pretty sure I can tell you we want the expansions as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, and for example, one of the things that we were thinking out is in the miniatures campaign, there were different characters, we have, of course, Shalan and Dalinar and Kaladin, blah, 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 blah. But we got if I don't remember it wrong, it's 3 heralds. And it's we had Tal, we had Nail, and where's it? 2? Just 2, maybe?
I think it might just be 2.
2.
Yeah.
And we were why 2 and why those 2 among everybody?
Well, those two are kind of the ones that we see the most on screen in the in the first 4 books, certainly. And so I would say with this new campaign, the focus has really been on the books themselves. There will be some new miniatures, but we don't want to overwhelm people with new things to buy. And most of the new miniatures will be focused on characters who aren't major characters from the book because you want a character that can be you in your campaign, or a character that can be some sort of NPC that you are making up or that your game master is making up. So that's going to mean that there are fewer things like new heralds or we won't have like Sadius or other characters like that we didn't get to. I mean, we might get one new herald. I have to think about that. Because there is a herald who we haven't done who's very important to the adventure. So maybe we'll get her in there. But we'll see what's possible. And most of the new miniatures are things that are really, in this case, designed around supporting the game as opposed to recreating some of the characters. But we'll keep making miniatures for years to come. We will still make new ones in the future.
They were asking, will we have, like, for example, like flora and fauna, like maybe the rock buds and things like that, or like more environmental and accessories, I think that they were asking.
Those are good requests. We will at least have more fauna. I don't know, in terms of plants, we don't have anything right now. It's a good idea. Maybe I can slip something into the mix, but at the moment, we will have some beautifully illustrated maps that will give you some of that, but I'll have to think about whether there's, we've got to some extent like limited slots.
Yeah.
There are only so many unique things we can do, and there's some question of what will people use the most. But yeah, definitely some creatures you've never seen before, and a lot of cool new characters, and a lot of fused. So including maybe even some brands of fused that you haven't seen before. We'll see about that. So there will definitely be, I can tell you that the RPG will have beautiful illustrations and detailed descriptions for all 9 types of fused.
Everybody buy the books. I mean,
I will say this. As somebody who grew up reading but not playing RPGs, and then eventually, I did get more chances to play as I got older, and now it's one of my main hobbies. But you can own RPG books and never play with them. You can read through this adventure and never play it and still have a great time and enjoy that experience. Just like you can have these miniatures and they're awesome even if you never paint them. And so, even more so in the case of the books, I think. So our base pledge level will be, if you just want the world guide, if you're just a reader, go for that. But I think any major fan is going to want all 3 of those books. I know that I would. And I'm not saying that as a sales guy. I'm just saying that as like, these are going to be the most, this will be the biggest concentration of beautiful original Cosmere illustrations that have ever been done. The leather bounds, some of their individual illustrations are probably better than the average illustration in our books, but we're close, and we've got a lot. So.
Where you were saying and explaining your study with role-playing games, I was remembering when I was like younger, and I had like my first computer. I think it was not the first because that was an Amstrad CPC 464, so that's the old times with the cassette and everything. No, but my, let's say, current PC was on 286, and those were like the early times of the internet. And one of the things I loved to do the most was like connecting with it, and then you connected to something. And I had lots of diskettes with art from Dungeons and Dragons because I was in love. Like, one of my hobbies was like online surfing by then, what was online surfing then, and then try to get the images because I also loved like Dragonlance and those stories, and the Dark Elf from Salvatore, and the role-playing games. I also had some, even though I don't play, because of the same thing, because it also expands the universe you love, and it's amazing. So I don't know, I would totally recommend, if you are a fan of the Stormlight Archive or the Cosmere or the role-playing games and fantasy in general, I think it's a must-have, because I'm just imagining playing it in my head, like how is it going to be, and I just can't wait.
I think I've worked in product development for about 17 years, and I think this will be the best product that I've ever worked on. I mean, that is the goal. The goal is to say, we, as a small company, we can still hire the people who write for the biggest RPGs, and we have. our team for this is fantastic. It's a really talented group of people. People who have worked on Dungeons and Dragons and Star Wars and Warhammer and Legend of the Five Rings and a lot of the best games out there. That's just the writers and designers. On the artist side, we've got some of the biggest name artists out there, people who work for Magic the Gathering and Pathfinder and movie concept art and amazing things. So we can, because of the way this crowdfunding allows the community to come together and say, this is exactly what we want, here's the money for it up front, we can do that. And that just wouldn't be possible. It wasn't possible 10 years ago, the last time that Brandon was trying to get an RPG going. But this time we can really do that. And it's just our goal to go toe to toe with any other RPG company and make something as good as, if not better than, what they're doing. So we'll see what the results are. I think this is a really good game. We've had, at this point, thousands of play testers, and we've gotten a lot of really glowing positive responses. Some people saying it was the best role-playing game experience they'd ever had, but everyone saying, yes, this is fun. This feels like Stormlight. So yeah, this is going to be really good.
Yeah. But it's like, it's the first time you do a role-playing game, and it's different from what you are actually doing, because now you have like 3 games in parallel. I know that this is like the main project because it's going to be launched this year, but then you also like somehow it popped like, hey, hello, here is your Mistborn deck building game, and we were like, what? So these are like 2 different. I mean, from my ignorance, that's 2 different projects completely.
What I would say is, with miniatures, while I have experience working on toys, doing miniatures or like a high-end resin statue, those were things where we had sculptors who were very talented and experienced, but on the sort of production and operations side, it was just me. And one thing I learned from that experience is making sure that we have, if we're doing something new, make sure we have lots of experts. And I've been connected to the RPG industry for a long time. 10, 12 years ago, I wrote articles for Dragon Magazine. I started the first ever fan site for D&D's Eberron campaign setting, which is funny because a couple of people who participated in that are actually participating in the RPG now, just coincidentally. So this is an area I know really well, but I've also hired 20 people who know this industry inside out. And anytime I have a question about something where I'm less familiar, I can go to Andrew or Lydia or Anthony or Lila, members of my team, and say, hey, give me the background here. What should we do here? And everybody knows what they're doing. So on that front, we have a lot of really strong experience that we've hired to the team. But when it comes to making other games, it is true that our wheelhouse is making card games. That's the thing we've been doing for 12 years, and that's also something we're doing right now with Mistborn. And I think in terms of board games, card games, I believe Mistborn is the best one we've ever made as a company, and I don't say that lightly. I think this is really just a strong game. Even people who don't know anything about Mistborn are going to want to play this game.
Well, I have a lot of colleagues. We try to play at the canteen at the office like twice a month. So now I have the excuse, hey guys. No, but I was you shared, I think it was this week, a couple of pictures. I think they were testing this game, and you mentioned that you were like also role playing with them, the TTRPG. So what are like their feelings? What was the energy there? What did they say?
Yeah, so last week was a really good week for Brotherwise, for me specifically, because we launched our Super Boss Monster campaign on Kickstarter, which has done way better than we ever thought it would. We thought it would be like $300,000, maybe $500,000 if we got really lucky by the end, and we're already at 725. I don't know if we'll get to $1 million, but we're potentially on our way there, and so that was really good. That was like, oh, we got more money to pay for all the art that we want to do for the RPG. But I also took a trip to Dragonsteel. We're based outside of Los Angeles, and Dragonsteel is in Utah. So it's not a long flight to get there, but it's still something I only get to do every few months. And it was just such a good trip. I spent longer than I usually do. And both nights I was there, I held game nights for Dragonsteel employees. And we played the Mistborn game, we played the RPG. And people there were already a little familiar with the RPG and knew what to expect. We still had a really good time. But with the Mistborn game, it was everybody's first time playing it, really. Brandon had played it, and Dan had played it in an earlier version months ago. But the people who played just, I mean, of course I would say this, but honestly, people were like, this is so good. And I actually personally, because I've been working so much on the RPG, it's my brother, who's my business partner, kind of the other side of the company, who've been working more on the Mistborn game. So it was my chance sitting down, demoing it for people, playing it a lot, to go, oh, wow, I knew this was good, but I didn't realize this was the best thing we've done. So it was designed by a guy named John D. Clare, who's done just tons of very strong games over the years. And he's a big fan of the Cosmere, and he worked really hard to make this a very unique twist on the deck building genre. So a genre that started with the game Dominion and has expanded to games like Ascension and Shards of Infinity, Marvel Legendary, and the Star Wars deck building game. There's a lot of deck building games out there, but there's no deck building game exactly like this. And just he's done some very clever things to make every turn feel like it's full of meaningful decisions. You have medals in the game. You've got the 8 classic medals and Atium. This is just a foam core mock-up, but every turn you can spend one of those medals, and as you proceed through your training, you can spend more per turn, and that lets you unlock the powers of different cards. You can always flare medals if you're willing to suffer the consequences of that in order to get more power. But that little system of burning medals that's on top of some of the usual deck building game, buy a card, add it to your deck mechanics that are very familiar. Just it's really good. And yeah, we've got beautiful art for this one as well. I'm especially fond of some illustrations from a guy named Austin Hartel, which and I'll send you some nicer images of these, but the cards that are kind of like mana in this game are all done like stained glass windows. And then the cards that are actions are done in a more sort of traditional style. So we've got like Iron Pull, which lets you attack or also pull a card from your discard pile to the top of your deck. We've got Charm, which is a rioting card here showing Breeze and Elrianne, and a really cute illustration by Deandra. That's one that's just all about getting more money. And then we have, Crushing Blow, which is an example of a pewter card, which is just deals a huge amount of damage, and if you put more pewter into it, can also heal you. So that gives you a little bit of a hint of you're going to be attacking people, you're going to be going on missions, you're going to be building up money to improve your deck. It's ultimately a game where you can win either by killing your opponent or by resolving 3 missions that you go on, but you're doing both of those things in parallel, and very action-packed. It's, Brandon was very clear about what he wanted from a Mistborn game. He said, I want you to feel like a Mistborn. I want you to feel like, I want you to be using Allomancy. I want there to be coins flying, but I also want there to be some element of intrigue. And John really put all of that into the game.
Oh my god. I remember the first time we saw like a picture, one of the cards, that there was like a number /89. So is that like 89 cards at least? Are more than 89? Are there different decks? Maybe?
Yeah. There will certainly be more than 89 physical cards in the game, but whether there are more than 89 illustrations, I could probably figure this out really quickly if I looked it up. But it's I don't have that number at my fingertips at the moment, but it's a good number. There's a lot of variety.
89 maybe the illustration.
That's
Okay, like the unique maybe card, but maybe you have like more samples of one card, like in other games when you are building the deck.
Yes.
Ah.
Yeah, I'm looking at, I have a deck here, which this is like how I keep track of all of the illustrations. And I have 86 illustrations in that file. This is the file that Katie Payne and I use to commission illustrations and keep track of whether an illustration is approved or underway. And I'm seeing 86 here. But of course, there are some, a lot of the action cards, there's more than one of in a deck. And then there are starter decks that contain the metal training cards and your funding cards. So there's definitely more than 86 physical cards in the game. But yeah, I think that's how many new illustrations you will see in this game.
Ah, well, I'm so happy also that you're working with Katie Payne, because I remember her from, so I started to see like some fan art we all did. And at some point she designed like some stickers for Dragonsteel. One of those
Yeah.
stickers that, it's funny because when you buy something from Brandon store, you know what? It actually makes you happy? Not the stuff you bought, but the sticker you got, the
Yeah.
surprise thing that is, what I'm going to get this time, And you were so super sad at some time they forgot about the sticker. You were like, oh my God, should I place another order to have the sticker? And then
Yeah.
Katie ended up working. Well, I remember that she saw some art also from the TTRPG on her Instagram. Amazing, like singers. It was impressive. And I think she also is working with you developing the Stars of Creation as well.
That's right. That's right. So Katie is as a major part of the Brotherwise team. So two artists who work with us really closely are Katie Payne and Marie Seaberg. Marie has been working on a lot of concept art. She's just phenomenal at looking behind the scenes at the world and looking very closely at the text to draw out details and say, okay, here is what maybe people from the Reshi Isles look like. Here's how we could make Iriali people look distinctive, and drawing from some real world cultures, drawing from fantasy. So she's been doing a lot of that work behind the scenes that then feeds into some of the other artists. And I'm really excited. There are also several new illustrations by Marie, which are done more in like a travelogue style, that are going to be in the world guide, where it's kind of like Shalon's sketchbook, but in color. So that will be, I think, some of people's favorite pieces in there. Katie, her job, she has some illustrations. She illustrated some singers, which she has shared on social media a little bit. The illustration of cultivation from Shards of Creation, she did that one. And the other thing she's doing is basically she's taken over a lot of what I used to do on the art direction side. I should even say, like last week, she completely just did my job. And, that's been more and more so the case, where it is really time consuming to talk to artists and say, hey, here's a scene that we want you to recreate. And in most cases, we're working with artists who aren't familiar with the books. So we have to go in and say, oh, that's a really nice illustration, but there are no green plants in this world. Sorry. Or, oh, that's a really nice illustration, but there's no moon. Oh, nice job there. But, the mists, only come out at night. So it's all of these details that it's her job and my job to remember all of these things and ask for these things. But then, she is an actual artist, whereas I am not. And where I can only tell an artist what I want done differently, sometimes with other illustrations as examples, she can just get right in there and draw over an illustration and say, hey, make it look like this or do this. So yeah, Katie has been awesome. She's been a huge lifesaver on this project. And yeah, she's just a really important part of the Brotherwise team as the art director for everything we're doing on the Cosmere Games side.
Yeah. I was wondering, do you miss it? Like the art directing, because it's not the same size, but you are growing a lot as well. Since the first game I bought from you, I think it was Boss Monster. By the way, thank you for the huge box. I didn't even know where to put all of the cards. It's like, oh my God, I don't have space for the cards. But now we get a bigger box. Cool. So Dragonsteel also has grown a lot. And I remember Isaac. It's weird for me to think Isaac as VP of something. Like, I have to get used to that. And I remember like maybe a couple of years ago, he was saying, I have so much work now, I cannot do maps. I'm like, and the more you grow and the more like you are like stepping off some things you love to do to jump into more directing, and the more you are a manager, which also happens in real life. It's you start to do less of things that you loved because you have like the whole scope. So do you miss it?
Yeah. I mean, that is a very classic thing to happen, working in the toy industry, when people go from designers working on the toys to design managers, managing people who do that. That's a tough transition. Some people just never make it, and they give up the promotion opportunities to be able to be a senior designer and keep working on what they love. I'm very lucky. I get to do on any given day more or less whatever thing that I want to do. There are things where it becomes very urgent and I have to tackle it, but I can bounce from activity to activity, knowing that there are people responsible for each one who are able to do it if I'm not around. And I think that's the best combination if you can pull that off. So with art direction, a year ago, even 6 months ago, I hadn't yet said, "Oh, okay, Katie can really do this." I was reluctant to delegate. I was reluctant to let go of something that I thought, "Hey, I'm really good at art directing this stuff. I know the Cosmere very well. I have a good sense of what I want visually, and I'm worried that if anybody else does it, I won't be as happy with the results." But what I noticed with Katie was the more I let go, the more she really grew her own confidence, and then she was doing a better job of it than I could have. And on the game design side, I love designing games, but I'm not as good a game designer as John D. Clare. So he's designing our Mistborn game. I could have designed that; it just wouldn't have been as good. On the role-playing game design side, Andrew Fisher, who's the lead designer for the RPG, I work with him really closely. If I say, "Hey, I really want you to do this," he'll usually do it, but other times he'll say no, and here's why. And I'll realize, oh, okay, well, he's right. He's better at this than me. So I get to bounce around. And so sometimes this week I spent time doing a really detailed brief for Chanel Ariel. I wrote the rules for what happens when you ask blessing and a curse from cultivation, or when you ask for a boon and get one of each. And that was like an incredibly fun thing I got to do. That was a few hours of that day, but then I could sort of hand that off for somebody to fix it and clean it up and make it a little bit better, and then jump over to the next thing and go talk to the miniature sculptors about what they're doing, and then go talk to my partner in China who's working on dice. And so for somebody who's a little all over the place, a little ADHD, it's nice I can kind of like bounce around, or like shrink and enlarge whatever I'm working on, like Ant-Man, to take on different challenges. And sometimes the thing I'm doing is answering an angry customer service email. And sometimes the thing I'm doing is going into a spreadsheet and trying to figure out how much money we're going to make. So, not every aspect of it is like the fun stuff. I just focused on the fun stuff there. But at least there's a lot of variety to it.
Yeah. I know sometimes people, I know you, lovely people, but they know you, hey, yeah, can we talk? I'm trying to explain this to people. So there's going to be like the crowdfunding campaign, wherever the let's say the platform for the TTRPG. Then the Mistborn deck building game is going to be like sold directly, I guess, from your website.
Yeah, probably dragonsteelbooks.com, but yeah.
But I mean directly online. And then they were feeling it would be like another Kickstarter, and I was like, no, it's going to be another thing. It's like you directly go and buy it once it's done.
Yeah, I think, when do we use Kickstarter? We don't want to be overwhelming people with too many Kickstarters, and because Brandon treats the Cosmere Games Kickstarters as if they were Dragonsteel Kickstarters, we have to sort of stay away from each other a little bit. And I'm always going to give Dragonsteel, of course, like the first chance. Like, they were very nice with this spring campaign. They said, if you want, we'll put Words of Radiance in the fall so that the RPG can come first. And I said, no, like, Words of Radiance is sitting in the warehouse. The RPG is still underway. Let's get, that's going to be better for fans. but we also don't want everything to have to be a Kickstarter. Mistborn as a game, it costs a lot to make and design and all of that, but it's still, as a product, it doesn't need, you don't need a like $300 version of that game. It will be sort of a standard board game price. We might have some kind of extra, like metal coins or something like that, but it's going to be a basic and maybe a deluxe version, nothing more complicated than that. The RPG is something that can really grow or expand or have stretch goals depending on how the campaign does. The Shards of Creation, that's a very simple, small game, like $20 or less, with just a smaller number of cards, like a kind of like a standard playing card game, like a poker deck or something. And so that one can go straight to retail, and I'm sure it will do really well there. So I think Mistborn, Shards of Creation, I expect to see those in bookstores around the world that are selling Brandon's books. But something like the RPG needs a bigger push. We're also working on a big epic Stormlight board game. I don't know if we've actually announced that before.
It was one of the things I had in my list.
Yeah, this is something we've hinted at, but we are working on a game that is more like War of the Ring or Star Wars Rebellion, something that fills up an entire table and an entire afternoon or evening. That is the type of game that I love, but I don't get to play very often because I'm very busy working through the weekend on all of this stuff. But it's something we're really excited about. So too early to share any details, but that is one that I would expect to be our next Kickstarter after the RPG. That one, that's a big one. Lots of miniatures and maps and things like that. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
That's going to make me real happy. I need expansion with friends, the one that you buy and then you have the friends, or it can also be online. Because we are living in Barcelona. We play with some friends in Madrid, and we play with friends who are in Argentina and Uruguay. And one of the questions we wonder sometimes is like, for example, are the Mistborn deck building game is it going to be able to play online, like on tabletop simulator, or maybe an online support? We are using something called Forge sometimes to play. And is it going to be possible to play the role-playing game online?
So the role-playing game, I can say yes, that there are a lot of ways that you can do online role-playing game tools that allow you to there's virtual tabletops and video conferences and things like that. And it's a big part of RPGs these days. And we're able to support that. The challenge with a board game is a board game you can play online as a video game, and we don't have video game rights. So, and that makes sense, right? Like, you don't want, even though this is a really great game, you don't want it to be the first Mistborn video game. You want the first Mistborn video game to be something amazing. And that's what Brandon wants too. So it might be trickier for what we're doing in the board game space to be virtually adapted. Never say never, but the role-playing game, I can say, will be something that we've already got people playing it online, including the friends in Uruguay. So it's been cool to see what playtesters are using behind the scenes for their digital tools, and we're going to do what we can to provide some good support there. That's another good example of something that could get better with stretch goals. If we have a successful campaign, we might be able to do more on the digital support tools side.
I played Descent, like the first edition of Descent. Then the second edition came, and I was like, well, half the miniatures we used to have. One of the funniest things was like having all the minis and then like placing them on the table, and you don't have a space for the tables, and then the chips and the beverage and everything, so you have to choose wisely. But I expect to have like at some point that feeling like everything on the big table, playing with your friends, and like moving everything around. It's going to be amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, that's ultimately like that joy of being physically with people and playing games face to face is, what our company's all about. And that's the kind of experience that we want to create. So it can be, I know for a lot of people, your immediate friends and your Cosmere friends might not be the same. Like the people who live near you might not be the biggest Cosmere fans, and the friends who are huge Cosmere fans, like you and me, might not be close to each other. But hey, at least the RPG is going to be a great way to bring folks together. And I will also say, every one of the games that we are making, and this is true, this is like what Brotherwise does, we don't make games that are as complex and fancy as some people. We do make games that are intended for anybody to be able to play. That, like, even if somebody's not a gamer, we want you to be able to enjoy our stuff. The role-playing game is being designed, like the adventure we're writing, you could know nothing about the world and jump straight into it, and you'll learn about the world as you go. The characters will learn as they're playing, like, oh, there used to be these things called Knights Radiant. What were they about? And in the same way that the characters in the novels are learning those things as they go during that time frame. The Mistborn deck building game, it could be your first Mistborn thing, or it could be your first deck building game. And we've done what we can to try to make that as accessible as possible. We simplified some aspects of John D. Clare's design to make it a little bit more approachable. And I think we still kept everything that's really good. But that's a high priority for us, is that we do want you to be able to play our Cosmere games with your non-Cosmere friends. So that will continue to be something that we really strive for.
Have you considered slugs? Like Cytoverse, Tynix, Spensa, board game, role-playing game?
I love Cytoverse. We do not have the rights to that, though. So that is, we feel ambitious enough taking on all of the Cosmere. So, things like Reckoners and Cytoverse are still available for other companies to work in. So we feel very grateful to have this exclusive partnership, and didn't want to stretch it too far. And sometimes, Brandon or Isaac will say, "Hey, what do you think of this company? We're thinking of doing a game with them." But the understanding in general is that the Cosmere is sort of the crown jewel and the thing that we prioritize in those conversations. Even though there's the Reckoners games that are out there are super cool. I'm sure there's going to be some really good Cytoverse stuff. I would jump at the opportunity to do it in the future if that opportunity arose. But I'm guessing some of that will have to do with movie plans or adaptations. Who knows? I don't know anything you don't know there, but we'll see. So
yeah. So, and what can we expect in fall for the crowdfunding campaign? Because I know that it's going to. Sorry, in fall, in August. In my mind, it's still fall. No, for August.
August is still technically in the retail industry. August is when fall starts. So it's when I say fall, it was that's what I've meant. But yeah, we can expect, I think, a really strong campaign. You and I were talking a little bit about stretch goals before the call started, and this will be a campaign where I think most of the value will be upfront. But there will be some stretch goals of things that, if this campaign goes really well, they're just things we could do that maybe we couldn't do, like extra adventure content or more digital support tools, or maybe supporting some actual play, video content and things like that can help get people acclimated to the system. So there's some cool possibilities there, and I fully intend to go into that campaign with a couple of ideas of what we can expand, but also being open to what people are asking for, what's possible in the future. And, if that campaign went bananas, the sky's the limit.
What do we need to have, like, I don't know, 10 more adventures? What does it mean successful? So enough to have,
we'll see.
Because we don't have the game yet, and I've heard of people talking what are the adventures, like the new adventures, like I don't even know what to tell you.
Yeah, to do, one thing that's worth saying is that because we're holding ourselves to such a high standard in terms of what's canonical, that does mean it's harder to add adventures than it would be for something like D&D, where we could just say, hey, go off, write an adventure, and we'll throw it in. With this, the main adventure that we've got is coming from Dragonsteel, and we're just executing it. If we added stretch goal adventures, it might be things where we go and we play in corners of the world that are not as controversial or as, impactful on canon, or that play through things that are well established. But part of what's cool about the core adventure is I wouldn't have ever proposed it because I would have thought, oh, this steps on the toes too much of events that Brandon might want to put in the books and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah. Well, so can't wait for August for something.
I've given you a couple of hints as to what's ahead, but
Yeah.
there's always another secret, and I can't reveal them all.
Thank you, Yanni. But I hope that you will be able to reveal more on CosmereCon 2025.
Yes. By CosmereCon 2025, maybe a couple more secrets will have been revealed. So we'll see.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. It's a total pleasure to talk with you every time.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Yanni.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.